Our Bible reading this week is in Colossians chapter 3. And so, Jeff, you picked the passages, bud. What's going on
What are
in
we reading
Colossians
for
3? As we
here?
think about being zealous for good works,
Right.
let's tie Colossians 3 into that.
Well, there's a couple things, David, I like about this chapter. I think that are useful to read and think about this week. Basically, you have this section 12 through 17, verses 12 through 17 there, that list a lot of good virtues that become good actions in our lives. And I like one of the things that this chapter does, which is the first part of the chapter, verses 5 through 11, lists all this sinful acts and bad attitudes and dispositions we got to get out of our hearts and our lives. And we get that part of it really well, but then Paul immediately follows the removing of sin with, you've got to fill in good works, a strong reminder that it's not good enough to God to not sin, that God literally wants to clean out this empty space in our lives to fill it with these values, virtues that become these good actions. And so I like that juxtaposition. It's a strong reminder that there's more to being a Christian than just not sinning.
It does give that broader picture of good works that you've been talking about since we started this in January, that, good works is not limited to taking food to people who are sick or visiting the hospital, which are certainly appropriate things to do.
Not to denigrate them, but just not to stop there.
Well, but I think we do, because how often have we thought about forgiveness being a good word?
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly.
And so it does give us that broader sense of what good works ought to include.
That's right. And then to finish the chapter off, you do have those, to your point. I mean, you have this, wives, husbands, children, bond
That's reminiscent of Titus. Paul did the same thing in Titus 2 when we were working there.
That's right. Goes through, and everybody, part of good works is everybody fulfill the role that you've been given, whether you're male or female and whatever kind of life obligations you have. Good works is literally just doing your job, doing what you're supposed to do in your role. That's a good work.
Yeah, I like you using the word role there, because those are God-defined works and purposes in life.
Right.
And so as we go about, for example, being the husbands God calls us to be, again, I don't think people imagine that as a good work.
Right.
And yet, in terms of what Scripture defines as a good work, that would be part of it.
That's right.
So one of the things that caught me as I was looking this over was sort of bigger picture stuff, or maybe a different way of saying it is the stuff that's underneath it.
Right.
He begins in verse 1 by reminding us, actually verses 1 and 2, to set our mind on things above. And I thought just how important that underlying principle is in defining what good works are, and how much trouble we get into when we don't have that heavenward focus, that sense of life's brevity, that really this is all about life as a pathway to heaven.
Yeah.
And that then defines in a more important way what the priorities ought to be in our work, I think.
Well, that word priority is the key there. That at the end of the day, the definition of good is not what we think is good or the world says is good, even well-meaning, sincere religious people say is good. You have to start with heaven's perspective, God's own perspective. He defines good and evil in every sense of those words. And
so that underlying need to have our compass set properly, and to remember that's our homeland, that's where we're headed, that's where we want to help other people go. And so as we understand that as our purpose and our driving mission, to let that define where our emphasis ought to be in the things that we do. Sometimes we waste ourselves on trivialities, and not even necessarily things that are immoral or wicked or bad.
That's right.
Just things that aren't all that important.
That's right. Priorities matter.
Well, so ponder that as you read through Colossians chapter 3, that underlying pathway, motive, direction that we're heading. And then I think as another piece, a takeaway, is to find ourselves in chapter 3. Whether it be some good work that we need to do, like forgiveness, or some role that we need to play. But as we work in the chapter this week, let's make sure that we find ourselves and see the good works that our unique role calls us to do.